Hi, you're listening to Stefan Livera podcast. So we are currently progressing towards a Bitcoin Taproot soft fork, and we've got this scheme called MuSig2. So if you're confused about that and you're unsure what it means for Bitcoin multisignature, well, this is the episode for you. Jonas, Nick, and Tim Ruffing from Blockstream joined me on the show to talk about it. This show brought to you by swanbitcoin.com, the best place to auto-stack your BTC in the US with incredibly easy setup and low fees. I really appreciate that Swan is Bitcoin only, and they're dedicated to Bitcoin education. They want you to hold your own keys. So if you have pre-coiner or new coiner friends in the US, this is a great place to send them. One of the big positives of regular recurring buys is smoothing out price volatility. So set and forget, enjoy your life. With Swan, they pull USD from your bank account, buy the Bitcoin, and withdraw to your cold storage. Go to swanbitcoin.com/Livera to get $10 of free Bitcoin when you start stacking with Swan. Have you heard about Bitcoin Black Friday? Bitcoin Black Friday is from the team behind Bitcoin Magazine and Bitcoin 2021 conference. Bitcoin Black Friday is a celebration of the growing Bitcoin economy. On the site, you can find active deals for up to 50% off on your favorite Bitcoin gear and other merchants accepting Bitcoin. And it doesn't stop with spending Bitcoins. Bitcoin Black Friday also lists over 65 charities that you can support with Bitcoin and a stacking sats page with ways to earn Bitcoin. If you're a Bitcoin accepting merchant, go to bitcoinblackfriday.com to list a Black Friday deal. And if you want to take advantage of the discounts and the sat stacking opportunities, sign up for email updates. That website is bitcoinblackfriday.com. Are you looking for insured Bitcoin custody? Knox is a Bitcoin custodian dedicated to ensuring their insurance protection covers the full value of their customers' assets. For example, suppose a fiduciary wants to hold $250 million of Bitcoin with Knox. Knox will seek to obtain $250 million of insurance, dedicated exclusively to that account and adjustable to volatility. No fractional coverage or narrow scope. Insurance for what it's worth, a tool to transfer risk. If you are a Bitcoin company, investment fund, trust, or family office, check out Knox for your insured custody. That's knoxcustody.com. Here's the interview. Jonas and Tim, welcome to the show.
Hello.
Hey.
So thanks, guys, for joining me today. I was very interested to chat a little bit about some of your recent work with MuSig2. But firstly, let's hear a little bit about each of you. So Jonas, do you want to just start by telling us a little bit about yourself and how you got into doing cryptography?
So I'm working at the research group at Blockstream. I work on libsecp, the library of Bitcoin Core. And I work on a few of these cryptography things, but mostly just because I want to implement them. And I want to implement them in a way that this is misuse resistant, so developers can use it without the possibility of making huge mistakes. And yeah, what else do I do at Blockstream? I've been working on Liquid a little bit and researching scriptless scripts. And yeah, these are mostly my responsibilities.
Great. And Tim, let's hear a little bit from you.
Hi, yeah, my name is Tim Ruffing. I'm in Germany, like Jonas is. I got into cryptography in the, I don't know, let's say the traditional or the academic way. So I did my PhD on cryptography, in particular cryptography in Bitcoin. At Saarland University, the title of my dissertation really was cryptography for Bitcoin and friends. So this is really on the spot. So during that time, I mostly worked on privacy in Bitcoin, and now that I'm in the research team at Blockstream, I work a lot on signatures in particular. Yeah, all the stuff we're hopefully going to talk about today, like MuSig, multisignatures, threshold signatures, basically everything that's related to Schnorr signatures.
Fantastic. So the context for today, we've got this coming soft fork that everyone wants into Bitcoin, the Schnorr, or colloquially the Taproot soft fork. So perhaps you could set the context a little bit. What's the relation between Schnorr, Taproot, and then MuSig and multisignature. So perhaps Jonas, if you want to just set the context for us there.
Yeah, so Taproot is basically this new witness program version that we will have hopefully after the activation. So instead of having like a SegWit version 0 output, you will have a SegWit version 1 output. And what this means is that now you have different ways of spending this coin. And one of these ways is to provide a Schnorr signature. So this is how BIP Schnorr relates to BIP Taproot. And this is kind of an upgrade to how this works right now with ECDSA signatures, because Schnorr signatures are a little bit simpler and allow a few more applications on top of that. And MuSig is the idea of making multi-signatures compact in Bitcoin. So right now in Bitcoin, you have this check multisig opcode, but calling this a multi-signature is perhaps a little bit of a stretch because it's not really compact. Because what you do is you just write down all the public keys and all the signatures, and then you verify them one by one. But what you really want is that this is all efficient, which means that you have a single signature and a single public key, but your policy is still a multi-signature. And this is kind of the idea behind MuSig for Schnorr signatures.
I see. So maybe just to spell that out for listeners who might not be as familiar. So current day multi-signature relies on using, as you're saying, this Bitcoin scripting. And as part of that, let's say we're doing a 2 of 3 multi-signature output, then we have to actually show both or 2 signatures. And what we're talking about here is in the Taproot world, we'll be moving to, and I presume you're referring to there, that's like the Taproot key path spend, where we can construct a multi-signature, let's say, between the 3 of us, and on the chain, you can only see one signature, correct?
Yes, although I think it would make sense to already start here differentiating between multi-signatures and threshold signatures. So with MuSig, you can do multi-signatures, meaning M of M or N of N. You need as many signatures as you have public keys. So this would be something that can be done with MuSig. And with Taproot, you can still use the old way of doing threshold signatures, where you just write down in the chain the signatures and the public keys.
I see, yeah. And so that's the difference between, let's say, in that example, doing 2 of 3 versus having it such that you must do 3 of 3.
Yeah,
right?
I think that's kind of an important difference in the terminology, because when you talk to a Bitcoiner and say multisig, they usually think about this N of M pattern, where N can really be smaller than M, as you mentioned, for example, 2 of 3. And if you look at the academic literature, what they call a multi-signature is really restricted to this N of N case, where you need the full number of signers. The other thing is called, as Jonas mentioned, is called threshold signatures, and we're also working on this. But MuSig so far only supports this N of N case, where the numbers are equal.
Okay, and so that's essentially the difference there between threshold signatures and then multi-signature when we're talking in the academic context, right? So perhaps you could just outline a little bit around this journey, because there are different forms of MuSig, right? So there's MuSig-1, MuSig-DN, and MuSig2. So perhaps you could spell out for us, what are the differences there between those different types?
Tim? Do you want to do it? You're the expert on history of MuSig.
History of MuSig, yeah. Let's actually go even a step back more and see what was there before MuSig, because there's really an interesting story to tell there. Before we had MuSig, so one of the main reasons to get Schnorr signatures into Bitcoin is really that you can build a lot of things easier with Schnorr signatures than with ECDSA. For example, multi-signatures, threshold signatures, and other advanced types of signatures, scriptless scripts, and things like that. So all of these are somewhat nicer in with Schnorr signatures, because the math around Schnorr signatures is easier. And so some years ago, I can't even tell when this was, people like Andrew Polstra, Peter Woy, Greg Maxwell thought about doing multi-signatures with Schnorr, and they came up with a scheme, and their main challenge was to avoid some attack that's called raw key attack, or others call it key cancellation attack, where, let's say, we are like we do a 3 of 3 among us here, and I publish my public key, and Stefan maybe publishes his key, and then Jonas is the attacker and looks at our keys and chooses his key depending on our keys. And by doing so, what he can achieve is that if he would do this in a naive way, then the resulting key, the multi-signature key that should represent all of us, would actually only represent him. So Jonas could sign alone with this key, which is totally not the goal of multi-signatures, of course, because we all should agree on the message.
Scary.
Yeah. And this is basically really just cancellation. You can think of just adding up, like if we add up the keys and Jonas chooses the key in a pretty way, then our keys just subtract out again, and they're gone, right? So he could sign alone. Yeah, and of course it's not what we want. So those people thought they have a solution to this problem, and which actually fights this problem. And in a sense, yes, what they came up was really a solution for that problem, but it had another issue too. And this issue is Wagner's attack. Maybe we will come to that later. I don't want to go into the details of this now, because I guess then the story will be even longer.
Sure.
But yeah, so they tried to publish, they tried to write this up in a paper and publish it, and then people pointed them to existing work in the literature that basically didn't solve this problem, but solved the other problem about Wagner's attack. And so the story there kind of continued, and then they got together with a co-author of Also of Us, like Yannick Serra from France. He's a brilliant cryptographer, I'd say, and he was happy to help them write up a proof for a scheme that's basically the combination of the two worlds that solve both problems. And this was, let's say, the old version of MuSig-1. And when I say old version, I mean like an insecure version, because even they screwed up again. So in this other work they were pointed to, this was a paper by Belare and Nevin from 2006. And this had so for multi-signatures, you need an interactive signing procedure. So all the signers need to talk to each other when they generate a signature. And the process in this paper had 3 rounds, so they needed to send 3 messages to each other. And Yannick had the idea of improving that to 2 rounds. But unfortunately, this idea was flawed, so we had to revert back to 3 rounds. And this is basically then MuSig-1, which is 3 rounds, multi-signatures, and avoid the key cancellation attack.
So can we just unpack the idea of interactivity? So as I understand, multi-signature today, at least in Bitcoin, or threshold signatures, I guess, if we want to be more technically precise, it is non-interactive, right? Like the 3 of us can just put in an XPub each and create this multi-signature, and off you go. But what's the interactivity part mean in the MuSig context?
Yeah, so I think there is still a little bit of interactivity, because your signing device needs to get the message, the transaction to sign, and then it replies with a signature. So you could say that's kind of like a 1 round signature scheme. And with this MuSig secure version of MuSig-1, we have 3 communication rounds. And this has 2 problems. One is just the communication rounds, they just add up if you have a protocol that uses this. For example, in Lightning, we figured out that if you would use MuSig instead of like regular signatures, then you would have to add half of a round trip without L2. But this would be a problem because this half round trip adds up on every hop. And we know that Lightning nodes are connected through Tor sometimes. So this could really add some latency. And another problem would be if you have a setup with multiple signing devices, and one of them you have in a safety deposit box. And either you basically take all your devices, bring them to the same location and do this whole signing ritual, or you have to go 2 times to your safety deposit box. And this would also be a problem, I suppose. So this is really the problem with interactivity.
Putting that into the example, as you were saying, you might have, let's say, 3 different hardware wallet devices and 1 coordinating laptop or machine with, like, Bitcoin Core or Spectre or something. And in that example, you would have to then go to each hardware wallet location, get the signature, come back, go to hardware wallet 2, come back, and like do a few rounds of that. And that obviously is not very practical. Could you also just outline for us there the difference in terms of setup of the creating that multi-signature quorum versus signing a transaction for that quorum? Is there a difference there, or is it still kind of 3 rounds, whatever you're doing?
I think if you talk about setup, like for MuSig, again restricted to the case that's n of n multi-signatures. One big advantage of MuSig in general is that the setup itself is still non-interactive, in the sense that you can take any public keys and combine them into an aggregated or an aggregate public key, and everybody can do this. So you can just like if I know the pub keys of you 2 guys, I could now immediately send to a 2 of 2 of you without even talking to you again.
I see. Gotcha.
There is a difference in when we move to threshold signatures. If we in the future want to extend MuSig to support n of m threshold signatures, say, then this would be an inherently different. I think there we really need an interactive setup, because when it comes to threshold signatures, the tricks that you usually play to make that work is that you create a secret key. So everybody creates a secret key and then shares parts of that secret key with the other people. And this sharing process needs to happen before we can use the signature scheme. So this is kind of inherently interactive. And there, in a funny sense, I'd say, then the what we call naive thing that works on Bitcoin today with scripts is still better in that respect, right? Because it's always non-interactive.
Right, from a practicality perspective. So in terms of that process you mentioned, if we were to try that, is that the nonce commitment part? Maybe you want to explain what that part is for us?
Yeah, so perhaps just to elaborate on another problem with MuSig-1, which is that you need to keep state securely. And this is kind of an abstract problem if you're not an engineer, but many people will be perhaps familiar that it's not really possible to back up Lightning channels. And this is a similar problem. If you start a signing session, you back up the state because you write it on a disk and then you back it up to your NAS or whatever. You finish the signing session, then you restore the backup, and then you sign again with the same session. Then you have reused your nonce, and you're not supposed to reuse your nonce, with a different signature, and someone can easily compute your secret key. This is the other problem with MuSig-1. So that makes it difficult also to. So one of our goals is to write libraries, right, and implementations. And in our implementation of MuSig-1, we have this huge documentation saying, you're not supposed to copy the state or write it somewhere. Just keep it in memory, and you have to pay attention to this and that. And no one reads these things, and this makes it really dangerous.
What was the approach going forward from that? Was it seen like, oh, well, we're just going to have to mitigate this and have all the application developers just be really mindful of it before they use MuSig-1, or was it more like, okay, now we need to find other approaches?
Basically, yes, because there was also this paper called On the Security of Two-Round Multisignatures. And they showed that you cannot prove two-round MuSig-1 secure. There's no way to do it in any model that we care about. So we kind of didn't try then.
But then it even worked, right? I mean, it's broken. Of course, they also showed that you can't prove it secure, but it's also because it's just insecure. So again, we are talking about the old version of MuSig-1. That's what Jonas is referring to with two-round MuSig-1.
But they didn't prove that you cannot prove another scheme secure. And so, then we basically started also looking into these other schemes like MuSig-DN and MuSig2.
Right. I think this is where it really started with MuSig-DN then.
Yeah. So let's get into MuSig-DN. What is that?
In MuSig-DN, so MuSig-DN, the DN spells out deterministic nonces, which is a very technical term, I think. But it really relates to what was Jonas saying with about you can't reuse states, so you have to store the state between the rounds of your signing procedure in a secure way. In particular, like you can't you have to make sure that it can't be rolled back. For example, if you run your wallet in a virtual machine for whatever reason, and you can reset this virtual machine, this would be really bad. And a very related problem to this is that of choosing nonces in a secure manner. And what's a nonce? A nonce is a number used once. And these nonces are required when you create signatures like we know them. Not only Schnorr signatures, also ECDSA signatures. And they have very specific requirements about being random. So they need to be, that sounds weird, but like very random. You can't have a small bias in this nonces. So the worst thing that can happen is, like what Jonas mentioned, is if you reuse your nonce. Like say you have a random number generator that is supposed to generate these random nonces, and for some reason it would output the same nonce twice, which is astronomically unlikely. But if it's broken, maybe it has this flaw that it would output the same number twice. And then if you use the same nonce to sign different messages, then people can just look at the resulting two signatures and compute your secret key. So it's catastrophic. It's totally game over. But as I said, it's even this is just the worst case that can happen. So even if there's a slight bias in choosing that nonce, there are maybe ways to extract the secret keys from your signatures. So that's why in normal single party signatures, if it's ECDSA or Schnorr signatures or at 5519, all the elliptic curve signature schemes we know of, there's really common engineering practice to generate nonces deterministically. And this maybe sounds weird, right? Because this deterministic is kind of the opposite to random. So how can this work? Well, it can work if you if in deriving those nonces deterministically, you kind of use your secret key as a secret ingredient, and then still no one can predict what the outcome is. So you can generate these nonces in a secure manner without relying on an external source of randomness that could fail, and still generate your signature securely.
So when we're saying deterministic here, it's kind of like It's like that concept of when you hash the same like word, it'll always hash out to the same, like so long as you do it through the same algorithm, it'll still hash out to the same outcome, right?
Right, and it's basically almost what we do, or it's actually what you do. So you would take your secret key, you would take the message that you want to sign, you put those into a secure hash function, and what you get out is the result of the hash function is something that only you can know because only you know the secret key, and you use that as your nonce. This is the simple procedure. And the problem with that, so as I said, like everybody is doing this in signatures because it's the right way. The problem is now if you move to a multi-signature world where you have this interactive signing process, suddenly it's the other way around. Now suddenly if you use deterministic nonces, your security breaks down immediately. This is a very very weird thing, and yeah, so we now even, like if you look at pip 340, which specifies Schnorr signature, we actually put a warning in there to make that explicit after people got it wrong and took our MuSig scheme and implemented in a deterministic way because they thought, okay, look, like this is we've always been told to use deterministic nonces, so of course we're gonna do this here. And I can't blame them for this because it's so natural.
So then how did MuSig-DN come up, and like what kind of context makes sense to use MuSig-DN?
So the interesting thing there is if only one signer derives their nonce deterministically, then that's insecure. But if everyone would derive their nonce deterministically, then it would be secure. And it turns out that you can build a zero knowledge proof showing to the other signers that you yourself have deterministically derived your nonce. So what you're doing compared to the normal MuSig scheme is just you receive all these nonces and proofs and you verify them and you generate your own nonce deterministically, and then this is secure. The big question there is how to, or the big part of the paper is, one, is this still a secure signature scheme? And two, how can we really make this efficient?
I see. And was this Adam Back's idea?
I don't know, actually. I would say it's probably folklore that came up in IRC or something.
I heard it's your idea, but I I can't. I don't know. But maybe you say it's folklore, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just the idea isn't really all that great. As I said, it's difficult to make it efficient.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about that process. So zero knowledge proofs, as I understand, they tend to be computationally efficient, or the size of the transactions and things like that are bigger. So tell us a little bit about that in terms of MuSig-DN.
So perhaps if we start with the end result, you can see that it's not too limiting. So on a desktop machine, it takes about 1 second to create a proof for a single signature, and a few milliseconds, I think on the order of 50, to verify such a proof. So that's not really a limitation, and the size of a proof is about 1,000 bytes, if I remember correctly.
So not an issue for a desktop computer, but perhaps an issue if we were to talk about, would it be an issue if we were to talk about hardware wallet devices like Trezor and Coldcard and things like that?
Yeah, these hardware wallet devices, they have very different specs, right? And they do different things on different processors. So it's not really easy to say if that would really workable. And in a Bitcoin transaction, you can have multiple signatures, not only one. But I think what this shows is that the limitation really isn't the computational complexity, but rather the code complexity that this zero knowledge proof entails. So if someone were to use that in practice, we have proof of concept code, but you really need to audit the code very, very closely and see if there are any flaws.
I see.
Yeah, so let me just stress that because people tend to forget about this. Of course, MuSig-DN removes one possibility to shoot yourself in the foot, which is like it removes this this reliance on the random number generator. On the other hand, it's much more complex than what we did in MuSig-1, for example, in terms of engineering complexity. So building this security or knowledge proof and implementing it correctly is pretty complicated. Of course, you can get it right, but software has bugs, right? So I don't have a measure on the lines of code of the zero knowledge proof as compared to the rest of designing, but I think the difference is large. Maybe, I don't know, 10x. This is just a guess. But of course, like if you have 10x lines of code, it's much easier to make a mistake there. So I think we really need to work on a careful implementation of MuSig-DN before it's really ready to be used and practiced, and we can trust it.
Back to the show in a moment. But first, are you looking out for your Bitcoin backups? Look into CipherSafe at cyphersafe.io, producing the Cipher Wheel product. If you've got a Bitcoin wallet or a Bitcoin hardware wallet and you have a BIP39 seed, those 12 or 24 words, have you got it backed up? Is it fireproof? Is it waterproof? The Cipher Wheel is a metal seed backup product. It comes in a wheel shape and you get tiles to put in, 4 tiles per word, and also the Cipher Wheel masks the words of your seed. And it's got a padlock tamper-evident seal, so you know if it's been opened. So make sure you or your loved ones have access to your Bitcoins if an accident occurs. To buy one, go to cyphersafe.io and use the code LAVERA for 10% off. And lastly, Unchained Capital, Bitcoin native financial services. Did you listen to my recent interview with Joe and Drew from the team? Unchained are making multisig really accessible for the masses, whether you are an individual or a business. Why not consider going from zero to multisignature security with Unchained? You can build it yourself, or if you want assistance, there's a Vault Concierge onboarding package, and you can get hardware wallet devices mailed to you and have guided setup calls to build your vault together. Use the code LAVERA for a discount there, and note they've also got business accounts as we spoke about, so if you want to use them for your Bitcoin business treasury while still holding your own keys, this is the place to go. Go to unchained-capital.com to find out more. Now back to the interview. Out of curiosity, what kind of business or what kind of use case would that make sense for? Like, are we talking like maybe a Bitcoin exchange wants to have like warm wallets and they would use MuSig-DN to distribute that? Or like what kind of example uses would you see for MuSig-DN?
So I think, again, this is really hard to say because we need to see how if it's really a problem to save or to maintain state or not. So we are at Blockstream, we are not currently focusing on developing these techniques and showing that our MuSig-DN implementation is actually without any bugs. So we are more focusing on MuSig2 right now.
Gotcha. Maybe one thing we could add here, maybe you can see this as a intermediate step. Because the scenario you mentioned, I think cold storage for an exchange, for example, is in a sense a good one because there you really need the highest level of security, I'd say. And you're maybe willing to accept, even if you run this additionally on a hardware wallet. I mean, maybe this then takes 10 seconds, maybe it takes a minute, I don't know, it depends on the hardware wallet. I'm just making up these numbers, but
yeah,
even if it takes a minute, of course, like this is usually not something that you expect from cryptography on your desktop machine. But moving from cold storage to warm storage, if this takes a minute, I think you don't really care. This is still acceptable. I think the big limitation here is that, again, this is only for n of n. And I don't think that if you are a huge exchange, you want to keep your cold storage in n of n. Because if you lose one of those devices or whatever it is, your keys will be gone, right? So you probably want n of m, where maybe this is, I don't know, 2 of 3 or 7 of 10 or something like this. And I think until we build a version of MuSig-DN that works with threshold signatures, and we're not currently working on this, maybe we can see this as more like an intermediate step, at least if you think about those scenarios that you mentioned, where you really need the highest level of security.
Yeah, just to give an example, for Lightning, it's not a problem to keep state because you can keep the state in memory. And if your program aborts or crashes, then you just do a completely new signing session. And the same holds for federated sidechains and also Blockstream Green.
So shall we chat about MuSig2 then? So what was the impetus behind this?
So the impetus, I think, was just realizing that there is some kind of trick where you could actually do 2-round MuSig. And it's a very simple trick. Unlike MuSig-DN, there's no heavy zero-knowledge machinery. The complexity is very similar to MuSig. And then we just started trying to prove this secure because we didn't want to make any claims again that we have found some 2-round scheme that was secure.
By the way, we maybe should mention that MuSig-DN also has only 2 rounds, but it's rather like a neat side effect of it, right? Because you need this expensive zero knowledge proof. It doesn't matter like if you have 1 round more or less. Yeah. But okay, this was only one addition about MuSig-DN.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and then we teamed up again with Yannick Serrin and wrote two different proofs and 2 different models to show that this can actually be used. And it's even simpler in code complexity than MuSig-1. And you could even say it's non-interactive because this very first round, you can view it as some kind of pre-processing step, which can happen before the message is known. So you could imagine that if you want to set up your quorum, you have some pairing step where you already exchange the first round, you store it, it's state, okay, but then later when you have a transaction to sign, it's the same as right now, no additional rounds or running back and forth to your safety deposit box.
In the paper here, you talk about MuSig2 being secure under concurrent signing as opposed to previously requiring sequential signing. So what's the difference there?
I think this really relates to what I hinted at earlier with Wagner's attack. So the reason why MuSig-1 has 3 rounds and the 2 rounds, the insecure 2-round version of it was insecure, is really only concurrent sessions, which means that you have a device which has a secret key and which is involved in multiple signing sessions at the same time, which can of course happen if this is your desktop machine and you're creating transactions with multiple people at the same time. Then only in this case this 2-round version becomes insecure, and attacks like Wagner's attack apply by basically the attack roughly works by creating a lot of signing sessions with you. Let's say like, I don't know, 50 signing sessions and then grinding a lot of hash nonces, but which is then possible, and then they can extract 51 signatures from you, but they should only be able to extract 50, right? Because you run 50 signing sessions. Now, this is again something that maybe is not, you could even say maybe that's not so relevant in practice, but we want schemes that are, as Jonas mentioned in the very beginning, that are, how did you say, robust to misuse, right? So if we as a protocol designer can build signature schemes that just don't have this flaw, then nobody can get it wrong in practice. And this is again, so like having multiple sessions is again something that could easily happen. Say you copy your key to a second device. Maybe this is something you shouldn't do, but some people will do. And then those 2 devices could have concurrent sessions, right? And they don't even know of each other. So this is very hard to make sure that you really run only 1 session at a time. And this might be even a problem if you go to scenarios where let's say Lightning, where you have a Lightning node and you want to use MuSig with a counterparty. and maybe there like two things are going on at the same time, and then you would be blocked, and others could run maybe like denial of service attacks on you by just starting a signing session and never finish it, and then you would wait for it to be finished, because otherwise you can't move on to the second session and so on. So we really want a scheme that's usable with as many concurrent sessions as you wish. And this is where MuSig2 comes in then.
Can you tell us a little bit more about MuSig2 and how it would look like and what's involved with it?
I think if you look at applications where we really envision this to be used, is protocols like Lightning, where currently you in a Lightning channel between two parties, they run a multisignature. Currently, they do this using the naive thing with a Bitcoin script, and this is really a scenario where we want MuSig2 to be used, because it's now kind of efficient, because you don't need these additional round trips, because it's only 2 rounds, and you can pre-process the first round in the sense that when you set up the channel, you can also already do the pre-processing, and then if you want to send some money over the channel, only then you get like the message you want to sign, and then it's just basically one additional message on the network to create the signature. And I think if you want to differentiate this to MuSig-DN, then it's really simple and lightweight, I'd say. So this is something you can write into a specification for Lightning, for example. Whereas probably, I mean, in theory, you could use something like MuSig-DN and Lightning, but you probably wouldn't want to have this in the spec, because MuSig-DN only works if everybody is using this deterministic nonsense trick, as we explained earlier. So you would enforce, or you would put the burden of running the expensive zero knowledge proofs on everybody, and it's probably not something you can agree on. But MuSig2 is simple enough that you can, or I hope that people can agree on using this or a variant of this in Lightning and in other higher level protocols, maybe this discrete log contracts or other things you can build with Schnorr signatures.
Okay, cool. One other thing that stuck out to me, I was curious to get your thoughts, and perhaps you could help explain this for us. What is the one more discrete logarithm assumption, and what's the implication of that for the security of MuSig2?
Tim, that's a question for you.
I'm sure you can answer that one as well. Yeah, no, I can explain it, of course. So all of our modern, at least the public key crypto, for example, when you talk about signatures, this is a public key primitive in cryptography because it has public keys, is built on assumptions, on cryptographic hardness assumptions. So these are problems that we hope that are hard to do on a computer, and that's why that's how they get their security from. And yeah, it's kind of weird when I say hope, right? Because it's really just a hope, but our confidence in these assumptions is usually really, really good, because people spend like 30 years on trying to break them and trying to come up with efficient algorithms and fail to do so. And this is how we obtain our our security, for example, for Schnorr signatures, by assuming the hardness of a specific computational problem. And this is, for Schnorr signatures, this is the discrete logarithm problem. So it's a problem related to elliptic curves, where you get a group element and you have to compute the discrete logarithm of it. And yeah, people tried this for many years and failed to come up with efficient algorithms for that. So we believe this is hard. That's, by the way, one advantage of Schnorr signatures over ECDSA signatures, because at least for Schnorr signatures, we know or we can prove them secure if the discrete logarithm problem is hard. For ECDSA, that's really a hard story. I mean, we also hope that ECDSA is hard to break, but we don't have nice mathematical proofs for this. This is one theoretical advantage of Schnorr signatures here. And now with MuSig2, we need to make a stronger assumption. For MuSig1, we were able to prove this secure if this discrete logarithm assumption holds. So, which basically means it's nice because as compared to Schnorr signatures, which anyway we need to be secure because otherwise MuSig can't be secure because it produces a Schnorr signature. We don't need we don't need to introduce additional assumptions. For MuSig2, to get this more efficient, we need to have an additional assumption. It's called the one more discrete logarithm assumption. And if you think about it, the normal discrete logarithm assumption is I give you one elliptic curve point, and you need to compute the discrete logarithm. And we hope this is hard.
Perhaps just to give an example, your group element would be your public key, for example,
right.
and the secret key is the discrete logarithm.
That's a very, very nice example I should have brought up. Yeah. So it should, of course, be hard to compute secret keys from public keys, right?
Yeah.
Because otherwise, all security is gone, of course. And this is exactly an example for a discrete logarithm. And so in normal discrete logarithm, basically this means I give you one public key and you have to come up with the secret key. Hopefully this is hard. And one more discrete logarithm, this is a little bit generalized. The game is different. The game is I give you, let's say, 10 public keys. And now you can ask me for 9 secret keys in a sense. And still you shouldn't be able to figure out the 10th secret key. The interesting thing about this is that you can't only ask for exact secret keys of things that I gave you public keys for, but you can also combine them. You can add them up. For example, I can send you 10 public keys, let's say public key 1 to public key 10, and then you could ask me for secret key 1. You could ask me for the secret key of public key 1 plus public key 2, and you can play tricks like this. But you can only ask 9 questions. But in the end, after you ask 9 questions, you can compute the secret keys of all of these 10 things I've sent to you. Then you solve the problem. And we still believe this is hard because people have used this in the past, but it's not exactly equivalent to the normal discrete logarithm assumption. So we have to make a stronger assumption there in a sense. But as I say, this assumption has been used in the past, so we are pretty confident that it holds. It's not an issue in practice.
Perhaps we could just walk through an example there. Well, actually, one other point I wanted to ask. So you mentioned earlier that your aim is that this would be used inside of Lightning as an example. Would it also make sense to have this as part of, just general hardware wallets and multi-signature security to use MuSig2 as part of that? Or in your view, is it not really well designed for that purpose?
I think this is really up to the designers of hardware wallets. And if people figure out how to do this, they really have a competitive advantage because using MuSig versus this naive technique of using Bitcoin script is more efficient. It saves fees and it's more private. So I think there's an incentive to get this working. And as I understand, quite a few of the hardware wallets already are stateful and depend on state to be secure. So it wouldn't be such an additional burden to also use MuSig2.
I see. Yeah. So I guess just as a quick example, I know some of the hardware wallet manufacturers are looking at these things like registering the other participants inside your quorum, right? So that's like for a security reason. So maybe that is kind of similar, like to that point you were saying about having to maintain additional state. So I'm curious then if you know whether they would need additional specs in terms of the current day hardware wallets. Would they need additional specs in terms of processing power or memory or things like that?
No, because these multi-signatures, they are very similar to just normal Schnorr signatures. So if you can do a normal Schnorr signature in a reasonable amount of time, you will probably also be able to do a multi. It's a little bit more complicated, but that shouldn't matter much.
It's really similar. I think that's really the selling point of MuSig2 is that it's as simple as almost as simple as a normal signature, also in terms of computing power and memory and all the resources you need.
Yeah, and this is also why we're calling it MuSig2, because it really supersedes MuSig1. There's no reason to use MuSig1.
Also, just to clarify, with MuSig2, is this a threshold signature scheme, or is this a, like has to be M of M, like 3 of 3, for example?
It is an M of M scheme, so you can only use it for having the same amount of signers as public keys. But as people might know, in Taproot, for example, you have this key spend condition, which means that in a Taproot output, there's this public key and you can spend directly from it, or you could reveal some parts of a Merkle tree. And let's say if you want to instantiate a 2 of 3 policy with MuSig, what you can do is you can just create 3 2 of 2 MuSig public keys and put them into leaves of this tree. And that way, it's cheaper than using 2 of 3 with Bitcoin script, but it also doesn't reveal that this is a 2 of 2 policy, because this again looks like a public key hidden in this tree.
If I've understood you correctly, this is that difference between, say, a key path spend and then a script path spend in the Taproot world, right?
Yeah. So you could, if you have a 2 of 3 quorum, there's perhaps one or 2 signers which are more likely to produce signatures, and you would aggregate their public key, put it into the Taproot key, because that's the most likely spending. And then the other 2 of 2s you would put into this tree. So if you would spend with these 2, then you would have to reveal that there is this tree, but you wouldn't reveal that this is a 2 of 2. You would only show, okay, there's a public key and you're going to spend it.
I see. Yeah. So maybe let me just put that into a practical example then. So let's say listeners want to do, let's say, Michael Flaxman's guide 2 of 3, right? Have one cold card, one Kobo, and one seed picker, which is like a paper, or a metal seed, the 24 words. And if they know that they're most of the time going to be signing with the cold card and the Kobo vault, then they would put that into the key path spend, and the other kind of spending pathways would just be captured inside the script or the tree aspects of it. And so that's how they could still use MuSig2 in this, like, hypothetical, like if cold card and Kobo supported the whole, etc. But I guess that's an example of what's possible, right?
Yeah, exactly. This is a simple way to create threshold policies with MuSig2 in a Taproot world. But of course, this doesn't scale very well. If you try to have a 60 of 100, for example, then your tree will get very, very big.
Yep.
I guess we really need to work on a threshold version of this, and we are actually aware that this is what a lot of people will need. Just that things take time. But I guess there's a lot of things going on. Also in other research groups. For example, there's a paper called Frost, or a scheme called Frost by Chelsea Comlow and Ian Goldberg, and they came up with a very similar idea, like we did for MuSig2, but their scheme works in a threshold, in a real threshold setting. We have some criticisms about their security proof, because I think we believe ours is more precise, but I really think they are going into the right direction. It doesn't have all the features that we want from MuSig. This kind of key aggregation step where you take some public keys and combine them into an aggregate key. They don't have this in the same way as MuSig does. But I hope that in the future we can combine all these approaches and can come up with the MuSig2 threshold scheme. But for now, that's I'm talking about future stuff that, of course, can take time to be ready.
But I guess the important part is that it's possible, right?
Right. So we believe it's possible. Also, if you ask me now, I could also write up a procedure for doing it. It's just that we need to be very careful and do our work and try to prove this secure to be really confident about it.
I see, yeah. And so are there any other key changes in terms of what it would look like in terms of setting up the quorum, the initializing of that multi-signature setup, or maybe any other changes in terms of signing a transaction? Or do you think it's all said and done, it's going to look very similar to current day multi-signature once the hardware wallets are done, like once the spec is made, once the hardware wallets are made, once the software is updated for it?
I would say so, but I don't say it with confidence because they're really we've learned in the past 1-2 years that there are really subtle attacks on these hardware wallets. So it's really difficult to rule out at this point that there will be some additional measures that hardware wallets would need to take to use MuSig2.
I see. And in terms of Bitcoin wallet software required to do Taproot Multisig or Taproot MuSig2, are there any key changes that you can think of there that are required versus, say, the typical ECDSA multisig available today?
I don't think so. I mean, it's relatively straightforward, I think, to integrate this as long as you're able to store this session state, or even better, don't store it, just keep it in memory and renegotiate or repair as soon as you start up again.
In terms of changes to Bitcoin script required, would there be any key changes there, or would it be kind of that aspect we were talking about before with the key path and the script path spend aspects of it versus the current day ECDSA just showing exactly the spending condition in the script currently?
I think this is kind of one of the nice features of this interactive way of doing multi-signatures or threshold signatures, is that really what comes out of the signing process is a normal signature, and what comes out of the key aggregation process is a normal Schnorr public key. So this just looks like a normal signature on chain. You can't even, so as soon as you have support for Schnorr signatures on the chain, you wouldn't even need, strictly speaking, you wouldn't even need Taproot to do this. You just need the ability to verify Schnorr signatures on the chain. You can use all those interactive schemes like MuSig, MuSig2, MuSig-DN to create your signatures. And then that's pretty cool because, what's end up on chain is just a public key and a signature. And it's not only nice for efficiency because those are really small, but also for privacy, because in most cases people observing the chain can't even tell that you use sophisticated multi-signatures in the background. It just looks like a normal spend.
Right. So that means in practice, people could be doing MuSig2 for multi-signature or threshold, doing a kind of threshold multi-signature scheme to hodl their coins, right, with more security, or they could be opening lightning channels to each other, and in terms of on-chain analytics or surveillance, they would look similar, correct?
Or they could do a normal payment, which looks exactly the same as well. Yeah. Because, like, just to answer the question, in the Taproot world, your spend is either just a signature, so there is no opcode because you provide a signature for the public key in the Taproot output, or it's just a check sig opcode. So the same as a normal payment.
Yeah, that'd be some very cool implications there in terms of perhaps giving everyone a little bit more privacy. Also, Jonas, I know you were working on some of the stuff around, or you were talking about some of this stuff, scriptless scripts and point time locking and lightning implications of this work. So could you outline a bit of that for us as well?
Yes, I think we touched a little bit onto that as well. So there's the idea that with Schnorr signatures, you can also do it with ECDSA, but it's more complicated. But with Schnorr signatures, you could do lightning payments with scriptless scripts. Perhaps people are familiar that right now, in order to make a lightning payment, you have these hash time lock contracts. So you need to provide a hash preimage. And one of the problems to claim a payment, and one of the problems is that this hash preimage has to be the same on every hop of the route, of the payment route. And this allows nodes on this route to correlate a payment and see where the payment is coming from. and where it's going. And one of the advantages with scriptless script Lightning is that you wouldn't have hash pre-images anymore. You would use basically public keys and secret keys, and you would be able to randomize this payment pre-image, which isn't a hash or a hash pre-image anymore, but it's a secret key now, and you would be able to randomize it on every hop, meaning that even if two nodes on the route collude and see or talk about which payments are coming through, they wouldn't be able to correlate it aside from timing, maybe, because now this payment pre-image is randomized on every hop. This is one of the advantages of scriptless script Lightning. And the other one is, or one of the other ones is that you get a proper proof of payment. Right now, if you pay someone, you get a payment pre-image, but every hop on the route gets this pre-image, so this doesn't really work as a proof of payment, and scriptless script Lightning solves that. But in order to use scriptless script Lightning with Schnorr, you need some kind of MuSig, preferably MuSig2.
Excellent. And listeners who are interested, you can check out my earlier episode with Rusty Russell, where we spoke about MPP, and he was talking about the proof of payment in that episode. And also, if you're interested in some other the Lightning spec discussion, also check out episode 200 with Christian Decker, where we go into some of that also. So, Jonas and Tim, are there any other pieces of feedback that you've received from other cryptographers or other people in security on your work with MuSig2 and MuSig-DN?
One interesting thing about MuSig2 is that I already mentioned that at least one other team came up with at least a very, or let's say the same core idea to make this to make this secure with 2 rounds under concurrent sessions. And there was even a third team, which is Handan Killing Alper and Jeffrey Burgess, that came up with the same idea independently. And this is kind of neat because this gives us some additional confidence, right? If like 3 research teams have the same idea, it's a fun coincidence that they have it at the same time. But I think this is because there's a lot of interest in building these multi-signature schemes right now. And yeah, if 3 research teams or 6 people come up with the same idea, then this gives us some more confidence that it's actually the right thing that we're doing here and that's really secure. This is one part. Jonas, can you say something about MuSig-DN?
Yeah, so just to add to MuSig2, it's really cool to see that other people are working on these problems as well, because in the past we also had problems just to motivate these problems, because often cryptographers think that these are boring problems that have already been solved, and why don't you use more complicated cryptographic assumptions and so on, because they don't really understand this very specific setting of Bitcoin, where we want to rely on only the discrete logarithm assumption, and we cannot easily make consensus changes, etc. And this is cool to see with MuSig2 that other people are interested as well. And this was also a little bit a problem for MuSig-DN to motivate this, because that was exactly the response we got was, yeah, it doesn't seem to be very interesting. It just seems to be more theoretical, whereas we think this is a very practical, I mean, not very practical because you have all the disadvantages of the zero knowledge proof, but we did this because we need this, we need it in a practical setting, and MuSig-DN makes some applications more practical.
I guess maybe a skin in the game question. So imagine, a few years down the line, would you guys be comfortable, keeping your own Bitcoin stash on a MuSig2 scheme?
Yes.
Yeah, certainly.
Well, that's great. Great to hear that there's some confidence there in terms of.
I prefer maybe a threshold setup, but as far as like I'm very confident in MuSig2, yeah. and I have, of course, and now I have some incentive to work on a threshold extension, right, in order to keep my own coins very secure.
Right, and I guess until a threshold scheme is done, then I guess people would just have to be really more careful about keeping the backup 24-word seed, for example. So maybe they would have like 3 of 5 and make sure that they've got all the 24-word backup, on the steel thing, so they can recover that key, that hardware wallet key, and still sign in a 5 of 5 or a 3 of 3 scenario, right?
Yeah, this works, but of course, this has the disadvantage, as far as I know, that you need to put all your backups into one location again to restore, right? So I think it would be better to create threshold policies using the Taproot tree.
Right.
I see. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
I think it also
to me.
depends on the scenario, right? Like if you store your bitcoins, that's maybe where like threshold things, like maybe if you do it in a Taproot tree or using other methods, will be better for now. In some scenarios, you really need this n of n, and our prime example again here is Lightning, and there we this is where we see MuSig2 at the moment, where they have just 2 of 2 channels, and this is what you need. This is exactly what you need.
Yeah, right. I guess, where do we go from here with MuSig2? What kinds of development would you like to see, or contributions would you like to see, or what do you see that's necessary before we get further adoption of MuSig2?
Yeah, so one thing that I really want to do is just to update our implementation from MuSig1 to MuSig2, and I hope that will be mostly deleting code, because you just delete now unnecessary state. So I'll be looking forward to actually do that.
And Tim, anything from your side?
Yeah, I think in terms of implementation, we have this repository SegP CKP or SegP256 K1 CKP, which Jonas was referring to, where we have currently an implementation of MuSig1, and we will of course update this to MuSig2, and I hope that others will implement our scheme as well, or use our library, because it's really simple in the sense that it's not hard to implement. Of course, like maybe I shouldn't say this, right? Crypto is always hard to implement, but if you already implement Schnorr signatures, then it's not much to be added on top of it. And this is really a difference to MuSig-DN, where you have this hugely complicated zero knowledge proof, which even scares me a little bit off from an implementation point of view. So I think that MuSig2, because it's so simple, we'll see more implementations than in our own library, and I hope that people can, now that it's out, play around with it and see if it fits, if it fits their higher level protocols, like Lightning, DLCs, scriptless scripts, and all the magic stuff you can build on Schnorr signatures.
Yeah, and I suppose previously the interest wasn't really high because no one knew whether Taproot would be a thing in the future, and now it seems like this becomes a reality at some point. And on the theoretical side, I think one interesting thing that we want to do with MuSig2 is realizing a concept that we call nesting, which means that you can have a tree of music keys. So let's say you have Alice and Bob, and Alice and Bob can aggregate their key, and their aggregated key can be used again with another participant called Charlie, and then they can aggregate this aggregated tree together to have basically a 3 of 3. But Charlie doesn't know that there's an Alice and Bob. He just sees their aggregated key, a single key. And this has also some applications to channel factories, and perhaps make some multisig setups more private, because now you have signers that don't need to know about all of the other signers. They only need to know about one aggregated key, and you don't know whether this is an aggregated key or this is a single signer.
Interesting. So that could make sense in even some kind of inheritance scenarios where maybe like a lawyer has a key or things like that, right?
Maybe, yeah. So one simple example. I'm not sure if it's a good example you want in practice, but just to explain what's going on there. Think of a lightning channel 2-on-2. Two of two. So you have say you have a lightning channel with some other peer on the lightning network, but you internally want to use multi-signatures for enhanced security. So your part of the lightning channel is again a MuSig maybe between your desktop machine and your hardware wallet. And like the other party in the lightning channel wouldn't even know or wouldn't even need to care that you internally run a MuSig. So this is maybe an example to illustrate what's going on here.
Yeah, interesting one. Okay, so I think those are the key points. Was there anything else I missed or anything else you thought you wanted to just discuss related to MuSig2, guys?
Yeah, if people want to help us implement this, Tim already mentioned libsecp ZKP is where we're working on, or libsecp. So see you there.
Right, and feel free to reach out to us and bother us with questions or ideas or anything.
Great. So where can people find you online?
At Nickler on Twitter.
Right, Twitter is nice, or GitHub.
Excellent. Well, thanks very much, guys, for joining me.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Get the show notes at stefanlivera.com/222 for this episode. Thanks, and I'll see you in the Citadels.